God, looking for the devil, chasing the high I couldn't keep forever. It's always worse before the better, I suppose. And how far down, it's hard to tell when to buy and when to sell. 'Cause I come down, it hurts like hell, and every thorn has its rose. Sometimes you're driving, sometimes you're stalling, sometimes you're flying, sometimes you're falling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive. Sometimes you're running, sometimes you're crawling, sometimes you're broke, sometimes you're balling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive.
I hit rock and drop the shovel, call my way up past the rubble, do my best, stay out of trouble, heaven knows. Sometimes the picture, it ain't perfect, but there's learning in the hurting. Sick of bearing all the burden, every thorn has its rose.
Sometimes you're driving, sometimes you're stalling, sometimes you're flying, sometimes you're falling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive. Sometimes you're running, sometimes you're crawling, sometimes you're broke, sometimes you're balling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive. On my descent, the turbulence is my best friend. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. I cut my life through pale blue sky to remind me I'm alive. Sometimes you're driving, sometimes you're stalling, sometimes you're flying, sometimes you're falling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive. Sometimes you're running, sometimes you're crawling, sometimes you're broke, sometimes you're balling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive. Sometimes you're driving, sometimes you're stalling, sometimes you're flying, sometimes you're falling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive.